Now, this is something that I see all the time.
Also, just so you know as well, I forgot to add in my background that my original passion was behavior and training. And I did that for many years throughout high school in fostering, rehabilitating. And then
Yeah.
before I joined Royal Groomed, I did manage a dog training board and train facility for about 2 years. So I'm right there in your world too, girl.
Totally, right. Actually, brings me to my next question, because it's like, what I see on my end is that people wait way too long if they have a puppy. If you get a dog as a puppy, like, they wait way too long to bring that puppy to the groomer. And then it can be traumatic for the dog. And it may not be like, okay, you got a puppy at, 2 months old and you waited till they're, I don't know what, 3 months old. No, it's you got the puppy at 2 months old and the dog is now 8 months old or 9 months old, and that whole window has been closed, like the whole nine, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, so what are you um, recommending people do when they have a puppy?
Mhm.
Like, they get their puppy at 8 weeks old or 12 weeks old or whatever, they're still in that great, you know, um, time period where you can
Yeah.
get all this
Get it
introduced.
right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So when your puppy is so young that it's not safe for them to go to the groomer yet because they're not vaccinated, they're not protected. Understandable. That's totally fine. I'm not going to tell you to go expose your puppy to a bunch of, potential bad things for them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can practice those things at home. So practice just holding their feet, rubbing, massaging their feet, and kind of running your hand down their leg or down their tail, holding their face. And I always put a caveat in here. If at any point your dog or your puppy seems distressed, like they are really, really uncomfortable, or they're really trying to bite you, or they're wiggling, or they're screaming, don't push through that. Leave that to the professional. There are specific fear-free standards that we go through when we're working through that with the puppy, that only a fear-free certified groomer is going to know exactly how to navigate that process. So if you find something like your dog really, really doesn't like their feet being touched, of course, yes, we talk about desensitize your pet at home, but for those dogs where they're really sensitive, it can be counterproductive and actually make it harder for your groomer to counter condition that behavior. So of course you can practice those things at home, if as long as your puppy's pulling away a little bit, that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you notice they're really, really distressed, just leave it to a professional. But I would say that as soon as your veterinarian gives you the green light to take your pet to a groomer or take your puppy to a groomer, get them in there. Part of the fear-free training is something called happy visits as well, which is where you just bring your pup to the groomer, they get some treats, they get some love, and then they leave. No services completed. Maybe you'll put them on the table so that they can see what the table's like. But that's typically, if you can do that, most pet parents, I will say, don't do a lot of happy visits.
They're
But
cute puppies, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're awesome.
right. Exactly. I don't need this. I'll just be able to walk in and get whatever I want. I can get the haircut done. But so happy visits are great. But I always recommend, when you're thinking about puppies, this is an early investment for a lifetime of success. So if you can bring your puppy to the groomer once a week for a month, and just get their nails touched, their feet touched, and things like that, they'll start to develop more positive experiences. And then if you can go every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and kind of start to spread it out. But you really want your puppy in the grooming salon as much as possible in the first 6 to 8 months of its life. Again, caveat here, that is with a fear-free certified groomer. You don't want to be exposing your puppies to any negative grooming experiences either. When our puppies are young, as of course you know this as well, they're going through different fear imprint periods as well. And if something really, really scary happens to them during that development, it could be a lot harder and actually ingrain kind of like a pathway in the brain that we have to then counter condition and work really hard to overcome. So always, it's good to get your puppy into the groomer as soon as possible, and very frequently when they're young, so that you don't necessarily have to do it as much when they're older. but make sure that it's a fear-free certified groomer, or at least somebody that you trust, that you're very, very comfortable with, that understands how to help a puppy become comfortable with the grooming process.
Definitely. Yeah. I like doing, teaching cooperative care to my clients
Love
and
it. Love
their
it.
dogs, to our dogs here.
Yes.
It's just, it's so important. And it not only, and it doesn't have to be a dog that is a long-haired dog that needs to be groomed. I mean, what about our short-haired dogs out there,
Yes.
They still need their ears cleaned, they still need their nails trimmed, they still, if you live in an area that has ticks, you still need to pull that, like, real life stuff, so, those things are so important to be able to get your pet used to, for sure. And for me, I am the person who says, you know, um, yeah, your dog's 8 weeks old. They have a round of shots on. Get them in here, because we need that social window is going to close before you know it. And what you have is what what you get, what they're exposed to at that time is what's going to shape the rest of them the rest of the time. Now you're catching up and management, etc. So have you had dogs brought in? Like, do you have, let me just back up. My brain is like,
no problem.
do you have like a criteria of, like, this dog's too aggressive, I don't think we can handle the dog? Or and when you're saying, also, this is kind of double question, or when you're saying, you're using your fear-free certification to help in these situations while grooming, does that include, like, a level of training, really, and desensitizing, and are you using food rewards and with that dog who's aggressive? Let's just take the aggressive dog.
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with the aggressive dogs, especially because I feel like they're kind of misunderstood, for one thing.
I know, we love them so much.
Yes, exactly. And they're misunderstood, and it's really rewarding to see the change in the dog's brain. I think it's one of the most visceral experiences in training, where you see this dog go from aggression and oftentimes fear, right? It's 9 times out of 10 fear-based aggression, and you've earned their trust, and it's like, ha, I gotcha. I won you. I did that. So it's
dog gets it too. That the dog's like, oh, I can trust you.
Exactly.
Oh my like,
gosh.
Cooperative care on another level,
And then the next best thing is the pet parents' reaction as well. Oh, that is one of my favorite things ever. I feel like a celebrity, like, it's amazing.
But I'll take it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, but that's what's really cool about Fear Free is, generally speaking, it's best practices. It's how do we reduce fear, anxiety, and stress, but it's also a structured training program that helps with cases like this, with dogs that are aggressive. So, for example, I had a poodle who was rescued. I believe she was about, I want to say 6 or 7, no idea what her history was, matted nose to tail when she came in, and she would scream at the top of her lungs and try to bite you anytime you just barely touched her. This was her first grooming appointment. And so we used a combination of things. Of course, fear rewards on that first appointment. She's not really eating very much food, right? She's not really super interested in treats. She's terrified. And so we start with a pre-visit pharmaceutical for this pet, and for these dogs that are in this kind of more severe red zone category, for lack of a better word, that have more severe anxiety, more severe aggression, and things like that. So that is something that you work with your veterinarian on. Oftentimes we'll use things like trazodone or gabapentin, maybe a combination of them. You might need to give your dog a dose the night before and they come in. And there's a lot of strong opinions in the industry from the groomer side of things and the pet parent side of things when it comes to medicating dogs for grooming or things like that. And I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. You can get your dog fully sedated for grooming. Say you have a Cujo that cannot be touched. You can take them to the veterinarian, have them sedated, and buzz them down. That is a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
Using pre-visit pharmaceuticals is a training tool. This is not intended to be a solution to a problem. This is not the dog is sedated enough for me to get this done without it biting me. What we're actually doing is counter conditioning. So if every time this dog comes into the grooming salon, the picture that it sees is, I don't want this groomer to touch me. I growl, I bite, they back off, I go home, right? And you get as much done as you can, but that's the same pictures. It's this fight with the groomer, a fight with the groomer. I'm afraid, I'm angry, I lash out, and then I get left alone. So with this pre-visit pharmaceutical, it's basically more like an anti-anxiety med. So if we remove the anxiety from the situation, that's step one. That helps the dog kind of reset the picture. And then that in combination with the fear-free training methods, where we're showing the dog, hey, I respect you. Hey, you can trust me. I understand what you're trying to communicate with me, and I'm communicating with you in a way that you understand, that puts you at ease as well. Things that are so simple, like instead of grabbing the dog's leg and lifting it up, if you just open hand, push the back of their leg gently, they're going to lift their leg up on their own, right? And so you're saying, hey, can you please pick up your leg, rather than just grabbing their leg from them. Little things like that in combination with the pre-visit pharmaceuticals creates a new picture for the dog. And that's where we start the counter conditioning process. So we may use pre-visit pharmaceuticals for 3, 4, 6 visits. And then that pet has been counter conditioned and they understand that they can trust their groomer and they know what the grooming process is like, and they're not exhibiting those behaviors anymore. And we don't need that pre-visit pharmaceutical forever. So there's training tools, there's methods. Of course, we use things like lick mats to help distract the pets when they're stressed out. But it's really this whole training program using a bunch of different methods to help get the pet to a point where they're comfortable with the grooming process.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's very holistic.
Yes.
You have to kind of look at the dog as a whole. You know, people too, like we need to look at, you know, instead of just nitpicking these different things, you know, a skin problem could be a low thyroid and they're feeding old Roy, you know what I mean? And I will tell you, and I am that person who will be like, yeah, no, don't feed old Roy.